Hey everyone, are you ready? Bon, Joseph, are we ready to start?
Yes.
Okay, we're good to go. Hello everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Shurhalas and I will be your moderator for today. Welcome to our live webinar titled Browser Privacy Changes, the Impact on IP Access and How to Future-Proof Your Library. We are live on Zoom. Also, we would like everyone to know that our webinar is being recorded. To start this event, let us all pause for a while for our opening prayer, followed by the Philippine National Anthem.
Let us bow our heads and feel the presence of God. Our most loving Father, we thank you for the gift of this day. We glorify and praise your name. You have showered us with so many blessings, and your presence continuously reminds us of your faithfulness and guidance. May we humbly ask you to shower our speaker, Anna Russo, of the greatest inspiration so that she may share the most of her knowledge in her field of expertise. May each one of us in this webinar absorb the invaluable knowledge and put into practice what we will learn today. Please bless us too with strong internet connection. May you bestow your blessings after this seminar so that we may go out and spread what we learned in the spirit of your love and generosity. All these we pray and offer to you. Amen.
Mga kababayan, ang pambansang awit ng Pilipinas. Kayang magiliw, ewas ng silanganan, alam ng puso, sa titik mo'y buhay. Lupang hinirang, tuyang ka ng magiting, sa manlulupin, di ka pasisiliw, sa ganapang tutok sa simoy at sa langit kong pagaw, ay hinatang tula, kawin sa paglayang minamahal, ang islakang pagkawan ko'y tagumpay na nag-iibig, ituwing at araw niya kailan pa may di magtitingin, lupa ng araw ng walang pagsinta, ko'y langit sa piling ko, ang inigaya ng pagkay mga api, ang mamatay ng dahil sa'yo. Mga kababayan,
Okay, I can see we have a lot of participants today. We are almost on the 150 mark. And we would like to know from all the people here in our webinar where you are from which major island group, whether you are from Luzon, Visayas, or Mindanao. Now, what can you place our poll so that we can see which from the different major island groups our participants are from? Just as a feedback or just as maybe a short story, our group has been going around the Philippines. We went to Luzon just last week to attend a conference. 2 weeks ago, we were in Cagayan de Oro, so that's in Mindanao. And 2 weeks before that, we were in Cebu, so that's in Visayas. And now Bon is actually in Cabanatuan, which is also a northern part of Luzon. So we can see our poll. Should we end poll? Is everyone ready? Have they voted? Okay, we can see that from Luzon, we have 35% of the group. From Visayas, we have, it's still changing, we have 17%. From Mindanao, 7%. And from Metro Manila, which is our winner, 41%. Thank you so much. But before we start, actually, we would like to also know how you greet your good afternoon in your own dialect. It's our first time to have a webinar in the afternoon, so we would like to know how you say good afternoon in your own dialect. Maybe we can ask Bon, your wife is from Iloilo. How do you say good afternoon in Ilonggo?
Hello, maayong hapon sa inyo atanan. Madamo gid nga salamat.
Wow. How about you, Joseph? Your mom is from Bicol. Would you like to say good afternoon in Bicolano?
Marhay na hapon sa inyong gabos.
Oh, wow. And
Hello.
how nice. And we'll go international. How about you, Nawat, from our marketing team? Would you like to say good afternoon in Thai?
Yeah, by Thai language, it is like สวัสดีตอนบ่ายครับ
Oh, a bit
Yeah.
difficult to pronounce, but good afternoon
Yes.
to everyone. Yes, hello.
Hey,
And
sure. We have
yes,
guests, our colleagues in Korea. They might want
also,
to, because Korea is they're famous here in the Philippines. Everybody loves to watch Korean telenovela. So can we ask our Korean team to more or less say good afternoon in Korean?
yes, maybe our
Maybe
Sepil, would you like
Sepil.
to say good afternoon in
Am I
Korea?
putting you on the spot? Apologies. Sepil or
Oh, somebody from
I
our
saw
chat
Andy.
said Anyong. Is that correct, Sepil? Anyong, is that correct? Somebody from the chat box said Anyong. Is that how you say good afternoon
Good
in Korea?
afternoon.
Or I think that's hello from the K-drama I've been watching.
Hmm.
Okay.
Anyway,
Anyway,
I think,
yes.
oh,
Thank you everyone for the warm good
how about Anna?
afternoon. Anna, but she's from UK, so it's English. Maybe you can say greet everyone good afternoon.
With pleasure. Good afternoon, everyone. And actually, I can also say it in German because my mother is German. So I will
Ah,
say Guten Nachmittag to everyone.
wow, that's nice. Something learned today, something new we learned today. So it's nice. It's very warm in the Philippines, but your greetings are even warmer. So thank you so much for your warm greetings. Okay, and now it's time to start with our webinar proper. So let us proceed and remind everyone of our webinar guidelines. All of the participants' microphones and videos are turned off by default. If you have questions on the topic, please type it on the designated Q&A box found at the lower part of your Zoom screen. Also, we would like to remind everyone that the chat function will be disabled. So if you have a question, it's best to type it in the Q&A box. Next. Questions will be read at the end of the presentation. This will ensure a smooth flow and to not interrupt the speaker. E-certificates will be provided for participants who have registered, attended, and answered our brief survey. So this is very important. You have to answer the brief survey before you will get your certificate. And please wait a minimum of 2 weeks before receiving the certificates via email. We will be having a fun game at the end of the webinar, so please stay with us until the end. And lastly, the most important, sit back, listen, and have a fun learning experience with us. Okay, now it's time to introduce our speaker. So you must all know that she is from UK. We mentioned a while ago, there is a time difference. It's now actually I believe 6:39 in the morning. So thank you so much for waking up extra early for us, Anna. Okay, today we are blessed to have Anna Russo. After receiving a bachelor's degree in comparative literature from Queen Mary University of London, Anna started working in the expert sales department of Hodder Education, a global publisher of primary and secondary textbooks. During her 9 years at Hodder Education, she worked with schools, booksellers, and ministries of education across the world, focusing primarily on the Caribbean and Singapore. Anna then moved to Sage Publishing, where she took on the role of business development manager for their SaaS portfolio, including the Lean Library and Talis products. She joined OpenAthens in December of 2023 as the Senior Business Development Manager for Asia Pacific and Middle East and North Africa. Ladies and gentlemen, let us all welcome Miss Anna Russo. Hi, Anna.
Hi, everyone. Thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
Yes, the floor is yours. Go ahead.
Thank you very much, Cher. I will just share my screen with everyone so that you can see my slides. Cher, can you just confirm that that's all appearing
Yes,
correctly?
I can
Perfect.
confirm.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Cher. And yes, good morning or good afternoon, I should say, everyone again. And also on my behalf and on behalf of OpenAthens, I'd like to say thank you for joining this webinar. I'm very excited to be here and talk to you a little bit more about browser privacy changes, the impact that they'll have on IP access, and how you can future-proof your library. As Cher said, my name is Anna Russo, and I'll be walking you through this presentation over the next hour or so. So just to give you an overview of what we'll be talking about, so I'm going to start off by setting the scene and giving you a little bit of context around the authentication and access management landscape. You may already be familiar with some of the things I'll talk about, but I think it's important to set the scene and lay the groundwork to then go on and discuss browser privacy changes, which is the key issue at hand. So we'll try and give you some more information on what these browser privacy changes are, what their impacts will be, and how you might be able to mitigate those risks. And then finally, we'll look at one of the solutions that are available to you, which is the OpenAthens single sign-on product. So starting off with the authentication and access management landscape, you'll see here a timeline of all the various different authentication technologies and what's happened in the last 25 years. So you can see that IP was the very first authentication technology that was developed. That was launched in 1974. And it's, of course, the foundation for other kind of IP-based technologies, such as VPN and Easy Proxy, which I'm sure you're aware of, and those were all created in the 90s. SAML, which stands for Security Assertion Markup Language, is a different form of authentication technology, and that was launched in 2002. And SAML is the basis for a different set of services. So you may have already heard of Shibboleth, and of course, it's also the foundation for OpenAthens. So starting off with IP recognition, I'm sure this might be a repetition or familiar to some of you, but as I said, I think it's good to reiterate just some kind of groundwork so that we can then look at how the browser privacy changes will impact IP recognition. So when IP recognition was developed in the 1970s, at that time, as you know, almost all computers were located at the library. So laptops didn't exist, smartphones didn't exist, tablets didn't exist, of course. So any research that was happening at the library. That means IP addresses were static, and there was no off-site, off-campus research that was happening. All IP recognition was taking place on site. At the time, of course, few people studied remotely or worked remotely. The possibility and the technology just weren't there. And that's why on-site IP recognition was really the only means necessary to authenticate users. Then, of course, in the 1990s and 2000s, users started using smartphones, tablets, and laptops to conduct their research. But of course, at this point, IP access off campus was not available. So IP recognition was very much developed with on-site access being the main focus, but off campus wasn't yet available. So this is when proxy servers and VPNs were created as an off-campus solution. And of course, you'll know this already, but proxy servers and VPNs aggregate individual user sessions behind an institutional IP address and allow users to appear as though they are within the publisher-approved IP range. So that's an overview of IP recognition and proxy services. Now, moving on to SAML, which was developed in 2002, as I mentioned earlier, and it was created to address some of the concerns and flaws around IP recognition. So you'll see on this slide that there's several different terms. So you have SAML and federated authentication and single sign-on. And often these are used interchangeably. So you'll hear someone say SAML, someone say federated access, single sign-on. They all refer to the same principle, really, which is that without this SAML, single sign-on, federated authentication, users need multiple usernames and multiple passwords to access licensed content and library systems. So you can see here what that user journey would look like. We have a very unhappy user who has 5 different sets of credentials that they need to access 5 different sets of resources. Now, this, of course, is not ideal. Today's world is very fast-paced. Users, especially the younger generation, are very used to instant gratification. They want immediate access to anything and everything they're looking for. And having to remember multiple sets of credentials is just not realistic or helpful to users nowadays. And on the flip side, you therefore have a single sign-on. So here you can see a very happy user. He or she only has 1 set of login credentials, which they can use to access all of their library resources in one go. So in terms of the user experience and the user journey, this makes it, of course, much easier for the user to access content seamlessly, easily, and without too many barriers. Of course, it's not just one username and password, but single sign-on also means that users only have to log in once during a session, and they can then go on to access as many resources as they like during that one session. So an even easier research journey is available to them. This slide gives you a brief overview of, I would say, the technology or the back-end workings of how single sign-on and SAML works. You can see it's quite complex, more so than IP recognition, which very much does what it says. It recognizes an IP address and then grants access on that basis. With single sign-on, it's based on the SAML protocol, where 3 different parties basically exchange information. So you have the user, the identity provider, which is usually the library, and the service provider, which is usually the publisher. The key thing to note here is that this entire system is privacy preserving by design. So any information that's shared between these 3 parties is pseudonymized, we say. So for example, if I were a student at the University of the Philippines and I was trying to access, say, JSTOR, there would be an exchange of information to grant me that access, but I wouldn't be called Anna Russo. I would have a pseudonym, which would be a string of letters, numbers, and symbols. So there is no personally identifiable information that can be attributed to me. So in terms of security, personal security, this is a much more robust system than any other authentication technology that's available. And looking at the 2 in conjunction, so that being IP proxy versus SAML, you can see some other differences on this slide as well. I touched on the user experience earlier with the happy user versus the frustrated user. So this is the key difference in terms of the user perspective. So we know that nowadays a lot of research happens on the open web. Users, students especially, will often go to Google or Wikipedia, Google Scholar even, to access research, to access content and start their research journey. And of course, students nowadays are used to immediate gratification, as I mentioned. They have Netflix accounts, Amazon, Facebook, and this has really redefined their user expectations. They want fast, simple access to resources. And this is something that SAML can provide. So with 1 set of credentials, users immediately have access to lots of different resources provided by their library, whether they navigate via their library catalog or start their research journey in the open web. And of course, this is not the case with IP recognition, because that requires services like proxy servers or VPNs for off-campus access. And in those cases, users have to log into the library portal first before they can navigate to licensed content. So this can be a little bit more cumbersome. There can be a little bit extra steps involved, and users might get frustrated and turn to other sites or non-licensed content in those instances. Another point of comparison to make is on the topic of maintenance. So, of course, with IP recognition, it relies on the IP addresses of that particular site. But of course, IP addresses change all the time, and any changes need to be coordinated with potentially hundreds of publishers that institution subscribes to. This can be time-consuming for the librarian or IT team that's in charge of that particular responsibility, and it can take away focus from more important tasks. With single sign-on, on the other hand, ongoing maintenance is very low. So there's an initial setup that happens where users are set up and subscribed resources are set up. I can show you in a minute what that looks like when I demo OpenAthens. And ongoing maintenance is low. So there's no need for the subscribing institution to manage or install anything. There's no need to update any IP addresses if there are any changes. No need to manage proxy configuration files. So it makes the entire process much easier for the library to control and to look after. And finally, we touched on the topic of security in our previous slides. So you would have seen that SAML is incredibly secure, not just for users, but also for resources and making sure that they're not being misused. IP, of course, can be tricky because IP addresses can easily be spoofed, which means users can pretend to be from an institution when they're not. And that means content can be accessed by users who might not or shouldn't potentially be able to access content. And of course, when that happens, publishers might shut down access for an entire IP range, which then means that all users within an institution can't access that specific content. SAML, on the other hand, so we do have that robust security system, which we rely on to make sure that not only are users protected, but also that resource access is protected. And if at any point we can detect any misuse, the libraries can restrict access on a user level. So it would never be for an entire group of users. It would just be on a specific user level. So those are the key differences I wanted to flag between SAML and IP recognition. And another difference which I wanted to focus on is, of course, the impact that browser privacy changes will have on both of these technologies. And we'll look at that now in the next portion of this presentation. So the goals for this part of the presentation, I've outlined on this slide. So as we speak, things are still very much in the air when it comes to browser privacy changes, and the effects of these changes are yet unclear, the full scope of the effects, I should say. But with this presentation, we're hoping to put into context what we do know and give some guidance on next steps as well. So first off, we'll look at what problems browser vendors are trying to address with these changes, and look at what changes are being discussed. We'll then take a look at the potential impact these changes will have on authentication technologies, and of course, the knock-on effect for library research workflows. And as I said before, nothing is set in stone at the moment, but I will share some recommendations at the end of this presentation, both from the library technology community and from EBSCO and OpenAthens on how librarians can mitigate the risk as best as possible. So starting off with the motivation behind these browser privacy changes. So what are browser vendors trying to achieve by implementing these changes? So at the moment, a non-transparent, uncontrollable tracking of users across the web needs to be addressed and prevented. So you'll know that when users are online, so when I'm online, when you're online, we are being tracked by browsers. So we all have a unique fingerprint, which is formed of data that's specific to the user. So whether that's the device you're using, your IP address, anything as specific as the size of your screen even. And there's lots of different data that forms your unique fingerprint. And what happens is that advertisers will track users' unique fingerprints when they move between different websites. So an example is if I've done some online shopping, maybe I've gone to Zara. I don't know if Zara is a big store in the Philippines. I like to shop there. So I've done some online shopping on Zara. I've looked at a dress that I like, but I decide not to buy it, and I'm going to go onto a different website. Maybe I'll read the news or go somewhere else. And then while I'm reading the news, there's a little window that pops up with that Zara dress that I was looking at. So that is tracking, basically. That is the browser seeing what I was looking at prior and making sure that I'm reminded of it to basically buy that dress that I was looking at while I'm navigating between different websites. When the internet was created decades ago, it was not originally designed with privacy in mind. Of course, the world was a very different place then. The internet was in its infancy, and we didn't understand kind of the beast that the internet would become in many years' time. And with the evolution of the internet, public authorities such as the European Union are implementing regulations like GDPR, which is our data protection regulation, to basically safeguard user privacy. So to make sure that users aren't tracked for advertising reasons across the internet. And of course, companies like Google and Mozilla and Apple are feeling the pressure to take action against tracking. So as a result, these vendors are actively exploring measures to enhance privacy protections and to reduce the numbers of users being tracked. And their motivation really is to avoid hefty fines or any substantial lawsuits. So before diving into browser privacy changes and what they are and their impacts, I wanted to establish first how tracking happens. So there's lots of different ways to track users, but the four most common methods are mentioned here. So we have the first one, which is third-party cookies. So this is when cookies can be read by any website, not just the one that sets them. So if you remember back to that example that I mentioned before about the Zara dress that I was looking at, and that dress then appearing on a different website as a little pop-up window, that's an example of third-party cookie tracking. The second option is location tracking. So this, in most cases, will just be a user's IP address, and this allows browsers to identify where a user is and track where they are. There's also browser fingerprinting. So to identify the user, the browser stores a significant amount of information about the user, and also information about the user's operating system and device. And then finally, there's something called link decoration, and this consists of adding additional characters to a URL in order to track the user. So in light of these browser privacy changes, or in light of these privacy concerns, I should say, and the new regulations around data protection, major browsers such as Safari, Mozilla, Chrome, etc., have started blocking some of the tracking methods that I mentioned on the previous slide. And the two main changes involve the ability to block third-party cookies, so that was the first form of tracking, and the ability to obfuscate or hide IP addresses, so that was the second form. And some of these changes are already well underway. So Apple and Mozilla have actually already started blocking third-party cookies by default, and Google will do so for all Chrome users this year. They've actually started on January 4th for 1% of their users. Now, this is significant because Chrome, and that includes all Chromium-based browsers like Edge, Opera, Brave, etc., these browsers have the biggest market share worldwide, so most users across the world will be using Chrome or a Chromium-based browser. And it's not just users that rely on Chrome, it's also publishers. So EBSCO have kindly provided us with some insights into their resource usage, and they found that 70% of sessions on EBSCO platforms use Google Chrome. And that percentage just grows when including other Chromium-based browsers. So any changes in Chrome will impact a huge amount of users and vendors. Now, all of this tracking is generally happening for advertising purposes. Now, the problem in terms of a library perspective is that our authentication technologies use a lot of the same features that these trackers do. But as far as the browser is concerned, it can't tell the difference between whether someone is going through a legitimate authentication process or whether someone is being tracked without their permission. So this is the area of concern for libraries and researchers. These changes are happening, and technically they're not meant to impact us, but because the authentication technologies follow a lot of the same principles that trackers do, we are being impacted because of that. So what are the actual implications of these changes on library research workflows? So at OpenAthens, our technical team has gone through rigorous testing of all the different scenarios and what this could possibly mean for researchers to try and establish the impact of these browser privacy changes on students and users of our system. So I'm going to start by looking at the changes which impact third-party cookies first, and then we'll look at what we call IP obfuscation or hide my IP. So in terms of blocking of third-party cookies, the main functionalities for all SAML-based services, and that includes OpenAthens, actually rely on first-party cookies. First-party cookies, as far as we know, are not going to be blocked anytime soon. It's only third-party cookies. So the blocking of third-party cookies won't affect the overall functionality of SAML-based services, and that includes OpenAthens. Moving on to IP obfuscation. So this is the key area of concern. So through our testing, we established that IP obfuscation or hide my IP will be a challenge to legacy authentication technologies, namely on-site IP recognition and VPN. So when a user's IP address is hidden, on-site IP authentication is no longer available, nor is VPN, because institutions cannot see a user's true IP address anymore. So the potential browser changes around hiding the user's IP address mean that it might not even be possible for traditional IP recognition to exist in future. Now, this is, of course, a concern because a lot of libraries rely on on-site IP recognition, not just for their regular users, but say for walk-in users as well. They need on-site IP recognition to access the library resources. So this is something to be aware of as and when these changes take place. This feature is already available as an opt-in in Safari, but of course, our main concern is around Google Chrome because that is where the majority of users lie. So we're currently expecting Google will test what they call IP protection in some Chromium-based browsers at some point in 2024. So as I mentioned before, everything is very much still up in the air, and we are trying to keep abreast of all changes as and when they're announced. But it's very much still in discussion amongst the browser vendors. So we are on top of all the developments, but nothing is yet set in stone. So when Google rolls out this IP protection at some point this year, we're not sure whether it'll be as an opt-in or a default setting, but we do know, as we can see on this screenshot here, that IP protection will launch as a default setting as of next year. So the full impact of IP obfuscation is not yet known. So we don't know what the repercussions will be of this IP obfuscation change. But we do have some kind of inclinations or thoughts on how this might present itself. So we don't think it'll present itself as a mass outage, but rather as a slow decline for libraries who rely on IP recognition. Another case, which I mentioned before, is the impact on walk-in users. So with something like Hide My IP, these types of users will no longer be able to access resources in the libraries that rely on on-site IP recognition. And then using EBSCO as an example again, you can see here some further statistics which EBSCO kindly supplied to us. And they found that 63% of successful access to EBSCO platform relies on on-site IP recognition. So that's a huge amount of EBSCO users accessing their content via on-site IP authorization. And actually 16% of EBSCO's customers use on-site IP and no other authentication method. So this is just a flag that these changes are not just a concern for libraries and users, but also for publishers and vendors who rely on on-site IP recognition for users to access their content. So these figures, coupled with the fact that 70% of sessions in EBSCO platform use Google Chrome, could be an indicator that the library authentication landscape is facing a significant shift. So to sum everything up, we know that browser privacy changes will begin to impact the reliability of on-site IP authentication. We also know that many libraries rely heavily on IP and some libraries only rely on IP. We're not entirely sure what that impact will look like once the browser privacy changes have been put in place, but we believe that the impact will most likely appear as a decline in usage or decline in interest, and users will most likely head to the open web more. And the potential for default IP obfuscation, so default Hide My IP, doesn't seem completely off the table. But of course, discussions are still ongoing, and we're keeping abreast of any changes and developments as much as we can. So turning the conversation now to recommended action and what we are doing in terms of supporting libraries. So of course, every library has their unique needs and capabilities. There's a lot of things to take into consideration, like setup and ongoing maintenance, ease of use, of course, privacy and security concerns. But the bottom line that we want to relay to you today is that it is essential to identify your library's alternatives to on-site IP authentication and to VPN, because we know that these technologies will be impacted. And if you rely solely on these, it is very important that alternatives are considered and looked at in the near future. And as I said throughout these previous slides, everything is still very much up in the air. We know the browser privacies are changing, but we don't have a fixed timeline yet. But we are in touch with the key browser vendors such as Google and Apple. We do have a seat at the table at these discussions, and we're very much involved in these conversations. We also are part of wider library technology groups such as NISO, who are also very much involved in these conversations. And actually, in light of these changes, market leaders such as NISO have recommended that SAML and federated access is the way to future-proof your library in light of this evolution. At the moment, these browser privacy changes are not an immediate threat to our product, that much we know. But we are, of course, continuing to rigorously test our product as well as IP on-site and VPN to make sure that our products continue to work and that we're prepared for any potential changes. So moving on from browser privacy changes to OpenAthens. So As I've mentioned before, OpenAthens is a SAML-based product, so this is a potential alternative to IP recognition and VPN if you were to consider alternatives in the near future. So giving you a little bit of background information first on OpenAthens before I show you the actual product. So starting off with the why did OpenAthens come about? So the purpose of OpenAthens is to remove barriers to knowledge. So a barrier can be anything as simple as a login screen or what we call the multi-click nightmare. So when a user is online and they try and access one resource and then they're redirected to another website and then another website and then they have to authenticate and then they're sent back to the website they were originally on. These are all barriers which we want to eliminate as much as possible to make sure that access to content is as seamless as can be. How do we do this? So we do this by providing a robust and reliable gateway between subscription-based content and those that need access to it. And what did we end up with once we established the why and the how? So we created the OpenAthens single sign-on software that enables users to access digital content no matter where they are in a safe and secure way. So I mentioned before when we were speaking about single sign-on, that means that users have one set of credentials which they use to access all content provided to them. And most importantly, they will only have to log in once and they can then access all of the content that they want to during that one session without having to log in or re-authenticate every time. So it is as seamless a user journey as can possibly be. We basically want to get rid of issues around forgotten passwords or having lots of passwords written down, which is not ideal, and just eliminate all these barriers to make sure that the research journey is as seamless as possible. So there are a number of benefits that OpenAthens can bring to your organization, happy users being the first one. So we want to create happy users by giving them the best possible user experience. I touched on this before, but we know that access to library resources is imperative nowadays, but it needs to be as seamless and easy as possible. So users have a short attention span. They're used to services like Google or Amazon where they get immediate access to what they're looking for. And any research needs to emulate that same experience. So single sign-on and OpenAthens in particular offers users that same experience that they're used to with their kind of personal, maybe social media or subscription services, and gives them that immediate access with one set of login credentials. Now, importantly, that happens whether they navigate via the open web, so somewhere like Google or Wikipedia, or whether they go through the library website. We want to make sure that we meet users where they are and capture their attention as quickly as possible. And we hope that with happy users, the library ultimately sees a decrease in troubleshooting, questions, any type of issues that users are having around accessing content. This generally decreases because access is made so easy and seamless with OpenAthens. We also give customers minimal admin. So OpenAthens is a fully hosted service, which means that the implementation process and setup is taken off your hands. So thanks to our partnership with EBSCO and their fantastic team, they actually take over the implementation for any new customers. Customers just have to provide a set of details on their users and their resources, and then everything else is taken care of for them. They're assigned an implementation specialist who walks them through the process, and then after the implementation is set up, both EBSCO and OpenAthens provide round-the-clock customer support because we have teams based across the world, which are at your beck and call at any time of day or night. We also want to provide institutions peace of mind. So this is going back to the topic of security, which I mentioned earlier. And of course, SAML, as I mentioned, is privacy preserving by design. So OpenAthens in particular, we do not compromise on security in any way. And by making sure that users' details are pseudonymized, we know that we keep your online patrons safe and make sure that your content isn't accessible to anyone who shouldn't access it. We also provide detailed statistics and insight into resource usage. So we'll collect usage data anonymously, of course, on how your users are interacting with your subscribed content, different sets of users, how they're interacting with subscribed content. And this can be used or beneficial for you in many different ways. So it could inform purchasing and acquisitions decisions. It could inform supports decisions and how you support different sets of users. And we'll look at this in a moment during the online demo where I'll show you our reporting module. And then finally, we want you to leave the difficult stuff to us. So we know that the authentication technology landscape is complex. It can be difficult to understand. It can be time consuming. So with OpenAthens and EBSCO, we want to take as much of the work off your plate and just make sure that your users are happy and accessing your content seamlessly and engaging with it as much as possible. So as a fully cloud-hosted solution, ongoing maintenance with OpenAthens is low, and we, of course, offer the scalability of a hosted product. I mentioned before that we take the implementation process off of your hands, so you do not need to do any implementation yourselves, and all of that is done for you. So OpenAthens was founded in 1995, and since our origins in 1995, we've grown into what we are today. And today, over 3,000 organizations worldwide have implemented OpenAthens, with millions, over 8 million, in fact, users accessing resources via OpenAthens every day. And I'd point out here as well that we are not actually sector specific. Of course, academia is our bread and butter. So a lot of our users are students, librarians, staff at universities, but we do also work across sectors. So in the medical sector, the research sector, there's different corporations that use OpenAthens, governments, the cultural sector. We have a few museums that use OpenAthens. So it is very much a resource that is not off the shelf. It is tailor-made to the specific institution and meets their needs as much as possible. You have an overview of some of our customers here. So you can see that we work, as I mentioned, with a wide range of customers, that whether that be very, very large institutions with lots of students like the University of Melbourne, who have a very complex setup, or very, very small institutions who only have a few resource subscriptions and few users. Our technology and our experience covers the whole breadth of institutions, and we can really work with anyone on that basis. You'll see here as well a couple of logos that might look familiar to you. So OpenAthens has 15 customers in the Philippines at the moment, and that includes all University of the Philippines campuses, Ateneo de Naga, Angeles University Foundation, De La Salle University, San Beda University, University of Asia and the Pacific, just to name a few. And if any of our customers are here with us today, I'd like to extend a very warm welcome to you and say thank you very much for coming. Now, before I wrap up, I'm going to finish off with a live demo of OpenAthens. So I'm going to start off, first of all, by showing you the end user experience. So what it looks like for a student, for example, who is browsing on the open web and stumbles across an article that they're interested in. How do they get access to that article? So we'll look at that first, and hopefully you'll see how easy it is to use OpenAthens. And then I'll finish off by showing you the backend area. So this would be the area that you, the library, sees in terms of your setup, your administration, and your reporting as well. So I'm going to stop sharing my presentation briefly, and I will now share my browser. Hopefully you're all able to see that.
Yes, we can, Anna.
Perfect. Thank you, Cher, for confirming. So as I mentioned, I'm going to start off by showing you the end user journey, the student journey. This might be the case for you as well. It might be a scenario that you recognize, and it's one I touched on before as well. We found through research and speaking to other institutions and suppliers that 70% of research nowadays happens on the open web. So most students nowadays will go to Google or Wikipedia in order to start their research. So at OpenAthens, we feel it's important to meet users where they are and to make sure that they are getting access to that content in their preferred workflow. So if you imagine that I'm a student and I need to do some research on coffee and neoliberalism. So I type in my research here in Google. I've got a couple of articles that are presented to me. And I actually like the look of this JSTOR article. I think this looks interesting to me, and I might be able to use it in my paper. Now, of course, JSTOR doesn't know who I am. So I am an anonymous user on the internet. I've just stumbled across this JSTOR article. They don't know that I'm a student registered to a specific institution. But helpfully, JSTOR and many vendor websites do this, have a login through your library option. So I've actually got multiple reminders here to log in through my library. I've got one up here as well. So this is particularly helpful when vendors do this because it means that they can capture students' attention right away. So I'm going to click on this link here, and I'm going to pretend to be a student from the University of the Philippines. Let's go with Diliman. Now, as a student, all I need to do is select my institution, and I'm then brought to this screen. So this is a screen that me as a student, I'm familiar with. So I will see this screen anytime I come across any resources that are subscribed by my institution. I know what to do here. I know which set of credentials to use because it is only that one set of credentials. So in this case, it'll be my UP webmail, or separately, if I have an OpenAthens account, which will be confirmed to be by my library, I can use that. This is as seamless as it gets in terms of a user journey. They are directed to log in via their institutional login page, and they can use that one set of credentials that they know in order to access content. Now, of course, I'm not a University of the Philippines student, so I don't have a webmail that I can use in this case. But if I were to log in, I would then be directed back to the page that I was on, so that article level on JSTOR, and I would then be able to access that content seamlessly. And I mentioned before as well, so once a user logs in once, that opens a session, which I believe is 8 hours long. And during those 8 hours, the user can then navigate to other licensed content without having to log in every time. So they would still have to select their institution, but they wouldn't have to input their login details every time. So that is the user journey from a user perspective when they're navigating on the open web. Of course, when they're going through the library environment, that is a much more seamless journey. They've already logged in. So once they've done that, they can access content easily as well. But overall, we want to make sure that students have the most seamless user journey as possible with OpenAthens. Now, moving on to the admin dashboard. So I'm going to use, apologies, if I just stop sharing the screen, I think it's because I'm in an incognito screen that you're not able to see that that's not working. If you give me 1 minute, I will just share my screen again. I'm just opening a new browser window for you, and I can then show you what that looks like. Here we go. So I'm just going to log in again to make sure that that all works. Yes, perfect. There we go. Apologies for that. I generally tend to demo in a incognito window just to make sure that I'm not mistakenly recognized anywhere. But sometimes on some websites that actually restricts access more than it gives me access. So now that I'm not in an incognito window anymore, you should be able to see everything as it appears. So this is the backend OpenAthens system. So this is where all of your library settings will be. This is our demo account. So none of these examples are real or of a real institution. All of the data is kind of dummy data, but it's just to give you a flavor of what the backend system looks like. So I'll cover 4 areas, apologies. So I'll first start by looking at how you set up users. We'll then look at how to set up access to resources. We'll also look at how to share resources. And finally, we'll look at the reporting dashboard, as I mentioned previously. Now, just to reiterate at this point as well, all of this setup, everything that I'm about to show you, is taken care of by the EBSCO implementation specialist that's assigned to you. So you do not need to worry about doing any of this yourselves. There's no technical expertise that you need to have in order to do any of this. But I think for us, it's important for you to see this backend area so that you get a good understanding of how everything works in the backend, and then can understand how that links to the front end for users. So starting off with setting up users. So we have different ways of setting up users within OpenAthens. The most common way, which I think 90% of our customers use, is a link to your local directory system, if you indeed have a local directory system. So if I go to Management and Connections and Create here, so you can see an example or some of the links to local authentication systems that we can set up. So Microsoft Azure or Microsoft ADFS are very common ones. I would say a lot of our customers use those. But we can also link to an LDAP if you'd prefer to use an API. Basically, any SAML-based provider we can link to and then import your users into this OpenAthens domain. So this is a very simple and easy way to get users into OpenAthens. Any changes you make within your local authentication system will automatically reflect on the OpenAthens backend, so you don't have to go back and forth and make changes in 2 different systems. And when these users appear in the OpenAthens domain, they're not actually editable in this side of the system, because we want to make sure that they can only be edited in one place so that there's no miscommunication or misconceptions on that front. Now, if I click on one example here, which is Azure, we can look at attributes. So when we set up a connection to your local system, you decide how much information you want to share with us. So what we call attributes is basically user information. So you can see here some examples. As I said, this is a dummy account, so we have something silly like foot size. But department might be more relevant, first name, last name, email. There's lots of different attributes which you can decide to share, not just with OpenAthens, but you can then also decide whether you want to release this information to vendors. So this is where you would see the releasable sign here. So we generally advise to release as few attributes as possible, because we want to make sure that users remain safe. And actually the minimum amount is one attribute that you need to share with vendors to make sure that the authentication process can happen. And with these attributes as well, you can see here that some of them have reportable next to them. And this means that you can report on them in the reporting dashboard. So that's particularly helpful if you want to look at something like department usage or usage of a particular course for a particular resource. You can be flexible here and decide how you want all of this information to appear in the backend and how you want it to be shared. The other way of setting up users is to do so manually. So you can create a personal account by just adding all of this information, and you can add users one by one if you like. Or you can do a bulk upload where you download a template, you add all of the information, and then you upload it into our backend system. So that's particularly helpful if you don't have a local directory system, which may of course be the case. And it just means that all of your users are imported in one go. And you can also delete and edit users using this bulk upload template. So that is how you would set up users within OpenAthens, or I should say that is how our implementation team would set up users within OpenAthens. The next step would then be to set up access to your resources. So if I go to catalog here, you can see lots of different resources that have been set up. Now, the important thing to note here is that you'll see that some of these resources have the word proxied underneath. So OpenAthens, as we mentioned before, is of course a SAML-based service. But that doesn't mean that we can only connect to vendors that use SAML. Of course, there's lots of publishers and vendors worldwide that rely still on proxy recognition, IP proxy, and that's not a problem from the OpenAthens perspective. We actually provide a managed proxy service, which allows us to connect to those vendors that still rely on proxy. And there's actually quite a few, as you can see here. So whether a vendor uses SAML or whether they use proxy, we can connect to all of them. And we generally say that any resource that you can connect to using your existing authentication technology, whether that be easy proxy or remote access, OpenAthens can connect to as well, because we provide a complete solution in that sense. It's at this point as well that I would bring up permission sets. So this is where you would be able to restrict or allow access to certain groups of users to certain content. So when you're first set up with OpenAthens, you're given a default permission set, which means that all of your users have access to all of your content. And that's fine. And some institutions keep it that way because that's how they're set up and that's how their systems works. But you can, if you want to, set up permission sets in order to restrict or control access on a more granular level. So say, for example, you had a resource where you could only have a certain amount of users accessing that content. You could then set up a permission set with that certain amount of users and only allow those users to access that content. If otherwise you had maybe a resource that was specific to a course, so maybe a resource that's for your nursing students, you could set up a permission set for those nursing students and then only allow those students to access that resource. So this is a way for you to control access on a more granular level if you choose to do so. And this can also feed into the reporting area where you can see exactly how your different user groups are using your resources. So once you've set up your users, once you've set up your resources and your permission sets, you can also share resources by using our redirector link generator. So we know, as I mentioned before, students nowadays might navigate through the open web. We also know that staff might share links to resources that are not redirector URLs, which means that students then, when they log in, go back to the home page of the resource. If, however, a library creates a redirector URL, that can then be shared with students and staff, which means that when they click on it, they bypass the select their institution page. They just need to log in, and then they're taken to the resource on a resource or article level. And this just makes sharing resources easier for libraries, staff, and students. We also have a public-facing version of this, so you don't need to be an admin of your OpenAthens account in order to do this. And this is also particularly helpful if you are moving to OpenAthens from a different authentication system where you need to update all of these redirector URLs, and you can quickly and easily do so here by generating multiple links. So that is the backend area from a setup and admin perspective. There are a lot more details to this. I've given you a very top level overview, but if you are interested in seeing a more detailed or granular demo, then I'm sure we're happy to organize this for you. So please get in touch with your EBSCO team and we can set that up for you. But just to finish off, I want to look at our reporting module. So I'm going to use a different account in this case, which is Millersville, one of our customers in the US, who kindly allow us to use their accounts for demo purposes. So you can see here the dashboard of the reporting module, and this is available to all OpenAthens customers. And this will give you an overview of your statistics. So you have your top resources, you have your total authentications, total accounts. You can see on a map where your users are based, which is great if you have campuses worldwide. But really the key report that institutions will rely on is the resource reports. So if I click on that, you can see here how resources are used on a granular level. So I'm looking at all resources here. There's a secondary breakdown, which I'll look at in a minute, but you can also break it down by hour, day, month. You can change the date range according to what your needs. And then you can scroll down and see exactly what these different graphs relate to. So helpfully, there are colors that relates to each graph. And you'll see as well that each color has two different lines. So you have a dotted line and a non-dotted line, which both relate to EBSCO. So the dotted line is your unique set of users, and the non-dotted line is what we refer to as transfers. So for example, here on April 20th, Millersville University had 126 users who accessed EBSCO content 285 times. So that's the differentiation between those two lines. You can also untick resources here and then focus in on one in particular. So looking at Wiley Online, and then you can track engagement this way. So for example, if I looked at my engagement for Wiley Online over the past year, and I saw a huge dip over the past few months, this could be a red flag to me as a librarian. So I might think, maybe we don't need the subscription anymore. Usage has been really bad. You could go back to the publisher and renegotiate your license or cancel the subscription if you feel that's necessary. So this is how this backend area can feed into acquisitions decisions. But you can also break it down on a more granular level. So I mentioned while we were looking at the admin dashboard, different sets of users that you can set up, attributes, permission sets. And this is where these are fed into the secondary breakdown. So Millersville, for example, breaks down their students by major and minor. So I'm going to select major in this case and hit apply here. And you'll now see that the breakdown below actually refers to the different majors that Millersville has. So I'm assuming this is psychology, biology, English, etc. So I can now look at resource usage on a more granular user level, and that all depends on how I've set that up in the backend area. And again, here I can dig down into a particular resource. So if I look at Sage, let's do Sage Journals, apply. I can see here that my psychology majors are the heaviest users of Sage Journals. But if I untick some of these and then look at maybe the lowest users down here, I can see that from this particular major that I've ticked, there's very low usage over the past month. And again, this can be a red flag for me as the library. So I could maybe investigate why resource usage is so low for this particular major. Maybe it's just not a resource that they need, or maybe it's a case of them not being aware of the resource or not knowing how to use the resource. So it could be a case of promoting that resource to that particular group of users, or offering them further support on how to use that resource. So really this reporting module, it is what you make of it. So you choose what information to display in terms of the more granular breakdown, and you can then choose to use that information as is most useful to you. And with that, I believe I'm at the end of my portion. I will stop sharing my screen now and pass back to Cher.
Thank you very much, Anna, for that very insightful talk. Thank you for giving us information on privacy and security of our libraries, and most especially on how to future-proof our libraries, and also for letting us know more about OpenAthens. At this point, we will have the open forum or the Q&A. So for those who have questions and inquiries about the presentation, please feel free to type them on the Q&A box. Anna is ready to answer all your questions, and Bon will now facilitate the question and answer. Bon, are you ready?
Okay, yes. Actually, I'll be stop sharing my screen, so at least Anna's face and our faces will be the ones in the screen. But anyway, for the again, as mentioned by Sher, for those participants who have questions for Anna, in particular for the authentication, for the browser privacy changes, please feel free to share your questions in our designated Q&A portion so that we could prioritize your questions. So let me check if we have questions in the chat box and in our Q&A. I also got questions via Facebook Messenger and text messages from our dear participants. Um I have a question here, Anna, about browser privacy changes. So can you share information on how can libraries stay informed about these browser privacy changes?
Yeah, thank you, Bon. That's a great question. So as I mentioned before, OpenAthens, and actually I should say it's our parent company, JISC, are very much involved in discussions with the key vendors, so Google, Mozilla, Apple, etc. We have a seat at the table in these conversations, and I believe it's monthly meetings with these vendors to make sure that we are on top of these browser privacy changes. We know what's happening in that field. Having said that, both OpenAthens and EBSCO have articles and platforms where we share any updates that we can with libraries. So I would encourage libraries to visit those. I can share a link to the OpenAthens. We have a dedicated website to browser, or dedicated page, I should say, to browser privacy changes. I'm happy to post that in the chat, that users are welcome to visit. And that's kind of where users can keep up to date on any changes and any developments. And equally with EBSCO, there's lots of really insightful information on EBSCO's website on browser privacy changes, where libraries will find any information that they need.
Yeah, thanks, Anna, and I hope you could share that to the participants via the chat box because especially with regards to this concerns and issues in the future, at least every librarian knows like what to do, or there may be like alternatives under what current authentication that they need, and if those in all of their resources might be all in IP authentication. So at least every of course the as you mentioned in your presentation that there might be an impact, especially for the users that, of course, that use their e-resources. Okay, so
Absolutely.
I have here another question, and I guess many of the librarians will relate to this question, especially that this is one of the, like I may say, one of the most popular authentication service we have in the Philippines. So as mentioned here in the question, we currently have Easy Proxy. If we switch to OpenAthens as a form of authentication, how long will the implementation be? And a follow-up to that, what do we need to change?
That's a great question. So I mentioned this during the presentation, but I think it's important to reiterate it here, that the implementation process is not managed by the institution. So we want to take that work off of your hands and make sure that you don't have an additional workload when moving to OpenAthens. So our partnership with EBSCO allows us to have a local technical support team, which will walk you through the implementation process. So the institution will need to provide some information in terms of their users, their resources to begin with. And then the EBSCO implementation team will start the setup process. So there'll be several calls and touch bases to make sure that everything is set up as the library expects it to be. There'll be a kickoff meeting, and we'll walk you through all the different areas of the admin dashboard. But we really want to make sure that your hand is held as much as possible during this process, and that you're not left alone or feel overwhelmed or unsupported. And EBSCO are absolutely fantastic at doing that. As I mentioned before, we already have 15 customers in the Philippines, which EBSCO implemented successfully. So really, the key message is that the implementation side of OpenAthens is not something to be concerned about. We want to take the difficult stuff off your hands, and we do so thanks to our partnership with EBSCO.
Yes, thanks Anna for that. Actually, just to share with our librarians who are current participants of this a webinar, that for the past like Open Athens implementations that we had in the for those 15 customers, so it will always be a cooperation between your of course the library, of course our support team with EBSCO and with Open Athens. It will always be a collaborative effort of each and every one of the people who will really be a part of that implementation. And I guess for those 15 sites, we have managed to have this implementation of Open Athens on time, and in particular of the deadlines that they set to implement those. And in addition, as mentioned by Anna, so once that there will be that there will be institutions who will confirm the subscription to Open Athens, there will be a dedicated implementation manager who will handle all of your concerns with that implementation. So of course, everything will be coordinated. So that is the good partnership between, of course, Open Athens and EBSCO for the implementation side. So I also have another question here. This is about the Federation of the Publishers in Open Athens. So there's a question here that what if the resource or the publisher that the library has had a current subscription is not a member of the federation? So can Open Athens still be used to authenticate? So to add more, this might be an like local content. So because here in the Philippines, they might have like they are subscribing like to local content here in the Philippines. So if that is not a member of the federation, so how can we, or how they can authenticate with that, or can they authenticate through Open Athens?
Yeah, that's a great question, and that is a concern that comes up a lot. I'm happy to confirm that that is not an issue for us. So we can connect to any small local publisher, large international publisher, whether they use SAML as the basis of their authentication or proxy. We have a lot of experience with setting up these connections to a wide range of publishers. There is a page on our website where you can see are compatible providers. So if you did have a concern around the connection to a specific publisher, you can double check it there. But I will also add that that page isn't exhaustive because we're always adding connections to new publishers as we gain more and more customers. So when we have a new customer, we ask them for a list of all of their subscribed content, and we'll then contact those publishers in order to set up those connections. And it is the only reason we wouldn't be able to connect to a publisher is if they don't respond to us. But from a technological point of view, there's no barriers there. So whether it's a huge international publisher or a very small local publisher, there's no barriers or issues in that sense.
Another follow-up with that, Anna, there are also like libraries subscribing, let's say, to a local content, and their only mode of authentication, it's like single user ID and password. Can we still authentic on how can they authenticate still with OpenAthens together with the other resources?
Yeah, so that's possible to have it work with OpenAthens. So we can integrate or connect to those particular resources and make sure that their users get the full single sign-on experience. Whether, as I said, it's kind of a local, small local publisher who uses username and password, or it's a large global organization that have used SAML for a long time. So we would support any scenario and make sure that an institution's users can access all of the subscribed content using OpenAthens.
Yes, and of course for those most of the subscription of most libraries as well in the Philippines are, I guess most of them are already in the federation. So I guess this collections that we cannot connect, let's say the possibility of integrating with OpenAthens is very minimal, but those are most likely the local ones, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And actually, we have a question here in the Q&A box. I think this is really more of the browser privacy changes and IP access. So there's a question from Mr. Julius Cortez. Our IP, auto, or multi-campus site utilization report will still be affected. I guess he is referring to those change if their resources are IP authenticated.
Yeah, thank you for that question, Mr. Cortez. So I would say to that the effect will be on-site IP recognition only. So as far as our testing has gone, we don't foresee that proxy or kind of off-site IP recognition will be affected, but on-site will affect it. And I can see in your question you're relating to utilization reports. So we do expect that when on-site IP recognition stops working, you'll see a decrease in usage from your on-campus users. So that will, of course, be reflected in your utilization reports and will most likely show as a decrease in usage. So we do expect that to happen as and when these changes take place over the coming 6 to 12 months and certainly next year.
Yes, indeed. And that's why we have this type of webinar for everyone to be, updated on what would be happening like on a long term. At least every library or institution will then be prepared for this browser privacy changes. Thanks for that, Sir Julius, and answering Anna. We have a question here in the chat box from James Kim. If a local content provider wants to join the Open Athens Federation, I guess this is a follow-up on the ones that we are talking about local content. Is there a separate or department or representative within Open Athens that provides guidance for this or does this activity?
Yes, thank you for the question, James. So yes, there is a separate department. It's my colleague, Kieran Prince, who looks after our publisher and vendor relations. If you did have a local content provider that wanted to join the Open Athens Federation, you're welcome to share that with either myself or your local EBSCO representative if you're an institution, and we can then pass that on to the Open Athens department that's in charge of that. It is separate to what I do and what Bon and Joseph and Cher do, but we will, of course, make sure that that information gets passed on. And we, of course, want to encourage as many local vendors as possible to be part of the Open Athens Federation.
And that's a good thing as well, especially for localized content to be included in the federation, especially like if we have here in the Philippines, like a local publisher that we could integrate with Open Athens. That would be good for, of course, libraries or institution subscribing to that local content. Actually, I have a question here. This is, I think, one of the most I may say popular question with regards to, of course, I guess a competitor of Open Athens. What is the main difference between Open Athens and remote access? So this is a very straightforward question.
Yes. So I'm going to quote Joseph, who's on this call as well, who describes remote access. And Joseph, you might have to correct me if I'm misquoting you, as IP recognition in disguise, I believe. So it is an IP-based service. So that would be the main difference between remote access and Open Athens. So going back to that slide, which I had included before, where we were looking at SAML, so the basis of Open Athens versus IP recognition, those are kind of the differences that you'd expect between those two services. So you'd have less granular control over your users, you'd have less security as well. You couldn't necessarily ensure user privacy. You have more in-depth reporting statistics with Open Athens, and in general, just a better user experience, whether users are going via the open web or through their library catalog. Did I fairly quote you, Joseph, when I said that?
I believe so. Thank you. Thank you, Anna.
But if anyone would have, as mentioned by Anna, if in case you want to know more in detail about Open Athens, so our team as well can provide you a detailed presentation and how we could help your library. Maybe you are shifting from, let's say, like your local authentication to, let's say, Open Athens, or if you want to explore Open Athens as your authentication system, so we could present that in detail. So in the interest of time, I'll be entertaining the last two questions, and this question is how can libraries track misuse with Open Athens?
Yes, so Open Athens has a misuse monitoring service, which is inbuilt into our system. So with that, we have a few things that we'll monitor, which will raise some red flags. So one of them, for example, is if a user tries to access content from 3 different countries within the space of 24 hours, I believe. That to us is, or that to our system, I should say, is a red flag, and that user will then be blocked because it's a sign of potential misuse. There's other instances, for example, where if a user tries to download the same resource lots and lots of times within a short space of time, that will also raise a red flag, and that user will be blocked. So there's different scenarios where that we consider as misuse, and the user will then automatically be blocked. We, of course, let the Open Athens administrator know, so the librarian or whoever's in charge of that account, and they can then either choose to disable that user completely, delete them, or address it with the user. We give them that information in the backend system. So that is how Open Athens controls misuse from our side. There are, of course, instances where the misuse isn't flagged on our end, but a publisher might see something as misuse. So if, for example, Science Direct found that an article was downloaded hundreds of times from the same user, they will, of course, flag that with the institution. Now, with Open Athens, that's very easy to do because Science Direct will be able to provide some detail about that misuse. So whether it's the IP address or some specific user attributes. And with Open Athens, you can, or we can help you identify that user on a user level for you then to either disable the user or delete them or address it with the user. But all that to say is that between the OpenAthens inbuilt misuse monitoring service and the publishers monitoring it as well, there's very little room for misuse and hacking. And anything that does happen can be addressed on a user level instead of an entire IP range being disabled, as is the case with IP recognition.
And Anna is right. The one Anna is telling is a real experience in one of our sites here in the Philippines. And through Open Athens, the publisher, Anna is right that the publisher, shut off already the access of the institution with just one, like user doing those excessive or misuse of the resource. But through Open Athens, we have identified that particular user, and of course, maybe the institution had done certain measures already for that particular users. And I have a last question here, Anna. I guess this is more of like a consortia or a buying group. So because they have individual like user directory, something like that, and
Mhm.
can a consortia, or let's say a system, can do a group subscription with Open Athens? My follow up to this is that, let's say they are already a group or a system, can there be like a parent, like a parent dashboard to see all of those part of the consortia or that system?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. So that's not something I showed you in the back end area, but we're happy to have a follow-up if you'd like to see that. We can set up what we call a parent organization, like you just said, Bon, and then what we call sub-organizations. So those would be your consortium members, for example. So the consortia would be the parent organization, and then the sub-organizations would be filed under that. And of course, every sub-organization would have its own setup, so their own local directory connection, their own set of users, their own subscriptions and resources. So we can set up a hierarchy which is clear and coherent for those groups, and make sure that they all have access to only what they should have access to. And the parent account can then manage that from their dashboard and see how their hierarchy is set up. So that's absolutely possible. We do have a lot of consortia customers across the world that we work with. Galileo in the US is one of our key ones, but also in the Middle East, we have Massadera in Oman. So that's something that our technical team is very familiar with, as is the EBSCO technical team, and the setup is very straightforward.
Thanks for that, Anna. And I guess that would be like the end of our open forum and for question and answer. For those participants who are just a bit shy asking questions, something like that, you still have the opportunity to send your questions via our survey link or the webinar evaluation form, and we will be sending those questions to Anna if it's okay with you, and we'll just collate the questions and we'll send to you for them to be addressed if there will be a question. But before we proceed to the next part of the webinar, do you have any like parting message with the participants with regards to this browser privacy changes, and of course open, and how they could use Open Athens as the alternative to those changes?
Yeah, absolutely, Bon. So my parting message really is what I shared on the slide, is that if you are using IP recognition or VPN, it is imperative that you consider alternatives and think about how you want that to work in future. We know these changes are happening. They are going to happen, if not this year, then certainly next year. So it is very important for institutions that rely on on-site IP recognition and VPN to look at alternatives. And of course, we hope that you would choose Open Athens as an alternative. We mentioned before, if you wanted to see a more in-depth demo, if you have any questions, both myself and the EBSCO team in the Philippines are always available for any questions or for meetings and calls. We're happy to demonstrate the product to you. But we feel that our product is a way to future-proof your library. We know for the time being that our product is safe and won't be impacted by any browser privacy changes. We're, of course, continuing to monitor the situation as it develops, but it is an option that's available to you, and we would hope that you would consider Open Athens moving forward. And before I pass back, I just wanted to say thank you all so much for attending. I really appreciate your time. I know it's lunchtime in the Philippines, and that's a very important time. So I appreciate you dedicating lunch to this webinar and listening to me present for the past hour.